I'm outta here, I said, and my wife replied, okay, fine, don't bother coming back. Normally, I would tell her to go to hell as I walked out the door, but today I didn't want my final words to be so rude. We've had similar arguments like this throughout our 14 years of marriage, but I always ended up coming back. Not this time though. In a few days, she'll figure out what I meant this time. Over the past 6 to 7 months, Jenna, my wife, has been getting more and more verbally abusive. I didn't understand what was going on with her snide remarks. To put it bluntly, I started avoiding her as much as possible to avoid making the situation worse. Every day, I spent more and more time lingering in the car. Sometimes, I even came home after Jenna and Carrie, our 13-year-old daughter, had already eaten dinner. I had to fend for myself. Sometimes there were leftovers, but lately I think they've been thrown out before I get home. My name is Kurt K. Kaminsky. Technically, my name is David Kurt Kaminsky, but my dad's name is also David, so they started calling me Kurt instead. Yo, just to clear things up, I ain't no junior. My old man's name is David John Kaminsky, but for some reason he didn't pass down the junior title to me. Not that I mind, I wouldn't want to be called junior or even DJ anyways. I'd prefer Kurt, or just nothing at all. Yeah, I'm Polish, well, technically I'm an American with Polish roots. I've heard all the Polish jokes, or at least most of them. They keep coming up with new ones every year. I'm the only Polish person I know in this small town of 10,000 people, besides my dad. Man, I've been the punchline of so many jokes lately. Technically, I'm only half Polish, the other half on my mom's side is German, French, Irish, and English. But since my last name is Kaminsky, I'm basically a Polak. My soon-to-be ex-wife turned out to be someone completely different than I thought. I only found out about it 4 weeks ago. I was spending more and more time away from her because of our toxic relationship. One Monday evening, after coming home to no dinner yet again, I decided to grab a bite to eat at a local restaurant. I was just sitting there realizing how messed up everything was. I was ready to order at the booth when I overheard 2 dudes chatting in the booth on the other side of the wall. My ears perked up when I heard them mention something about a Pole. I eavesdropped and heard one of the guys say, "So, how long have you been fooling around with the Poe's wife?" Since they tied the knot. In fact, I even hooked up with her on their wedding day and he had no clue. I didn't recognize the first guy's voice, but I knew right away that the second guy was my buddy George. I was in shock. They kept talking, but I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I didn't hear anything else until George said, "Yes, let's meet up and have some fun at least twice a month." Kurt is always so busy in the parking lot, he doesn't even know what's going on. Well, that's just typical. Just then, the waitress came over to take my order and I quietly said, "I'm sorry, I have to go." I left, walking away from their table so they wouldn't see me. I couldn't believe it, my wife Jenna with my best friend, who was even the best man at our wedding. That's all, my mechanic, and he will be for a while. Unbelievable. George is my go-to guy for fixing up all my cars. He's not just any old mechanic, he's an independent contractor who I trust exclusively. Yep, you guessed it, I run a used car dealership. I know, used car salesmen get a bad rep, but my business is thriving. People come to me because they know they'll get a reliable car at a fair price. And if any issues pop up, I always make it right. George has been with me from the start, and I make sure to keep him busy and compensate him well. I wanted to make sure you knew the real deal. Yo, I hired this dude, but he was like, I can't respect myself if I have a douchebag as a boss. He said it as a joke, but I could tell he was dead serious. Still, I brought him on as my mechanic contractor, even though he wasn't really independent, I was his only paycheck. This is gonna bite him in the ass. I left the spot and cruised around the block, wondering if his story was legit or if he was just talking shit. They could have hired a detective, but if what he said was true, they only met up twice a month. This might end up being a waste of money, but all I could do was snoop through her phone and email, so that's exactly what I did. When I got home, Jenna was acting weird as usual, which worked for me because I didn't want to talk to her until I found out the truth. After she passed out on her side of the bed, I got up and checked her email. Nothing fishy there. Her phone had a password, but it didn't take me long to figure out that our daughter's birthday was the code. I saw a few messages that could have been misinterpreted, but nothing concrete. So, George's name was on her phone, but he was my bestie, so it wasn't that weird. Maybe he was just bullshitting, I thought. But her actions lately got me thinking that something's up with her. Maybe not with George, but with someone else. I went to bed and couldn't sleep, tossing and turning. It all went down sometime after 2:43 a.m. Man, the clock was stuck on that time when I checked it last, and the next day at the car dealership, George showed up and started joking about the polls. That's typical for him, so I usually just chuckle a bit and move on. But today, I couldn't hold back and I snapped at him. I mean, George, what do you really know about Poland? I bet if I gave you a map of the world, you wouldn't even be able to point it out. You make fun of all polls being dumb, but I'm pretty sure they could at least find the US and maybe even our state on a map. Why don't you do some actual work? George just stared at me. I didn't know what to say, but he knew I was right. He couldn't find Poland on a map to save his life. George was never the academic type, but he was good-looking and had street smarts. He knew a lot about engines, but he never went to college. I think that's why he hung out with me in high school. I helped him with his homework so he could at least graduate. Now I'm starting to question my choice of friends. He got me thinking about choosing a wife. I went into my office, closed the door, and I started thinking about how to catch them in the act, but I knew I couldn't confront them because they would just deny it. I needed solid evidence. So I reached out to a private investigator in Santa Fe and shared my suspicions. He said it would be too costly to monitor them since it only happens twice a month. He suggested putting a tracker on my wife's phone so I can see where it is at all times. He also mentioned installing cameras in my house, but warned me that I would need to invest in top-notch, expensive ones for them to be effective. They'll probably get caught even with fancy cameras. If your wife pays attention, she might notice something off. If I were you, I'd track her phone and try to catch them at a motel or something. He suggested a tracking app and I said I'd pay him back, but I didn't do anything, so you don't owe me. He said all the info I gave you could have been found online. I asked you for a "Hey, thanks for helping me out with that exam. I'll send you a check in the mail soon. If you're ever in Silver City, swing by Kaminsky's parking lot and say hi. I don't usually go to that part of the state, but I'll keep an eye out for you," he said, and I could tell he was serious. One of the reasons I did well selling cars was because I made people feel important. I learned early on that people need to feel like their opinions and actions matter. I checked out some tracking software and figured I could handle that at least. Then he glanced at the I borrowed my friend's camera and realized he was totally right. He saved me some cash, time, and the headache of buying a new one. I mean, Jenna would have totally noticed if I bought a new one that night. So, after everyone went to bed, I snuck out and downloaded this tracking app on her phone and synced it with mine. It runs in the background without her knowing. That night, I slept like a baby. The next day at work, I checked the app every now and then. Jenna works part-time at the university bookstore, only like 15 to 20 hours a week. She calls the money she makes mad money and spends it on. So she was doing her thing, heading to the salon. I checked and she was at the grocery store, then back home. George was at home most of the day, but when Jenna was home, he was at work. At least that day, I knew nothing shady was going on. That evening, I decided to be nicer to my wife and daughter. When I asked if they wanted to go out to eat, my wife seemed to like the idea. Carrie, on the other hand, was being a typical 13-year-old, not sure if she wanted to hang out with her parents. I pushed a bit and she reluctantly came along. The dinner with the car was nice. I made sure to bring up George in the conversation, but Jenna avoided eye contact and steered the conversation in a different direction when she caught me staring at her. It only made me more suspicious. I wanted to know if what George said was true, so I needed to investigate somehow that night. I didn't snoop through her phone, but I had no luck checking her calls or messages. She must have either deleted them right away or never made them in the first place. As I climbed into bed, I thanked Jenna for coming to dinner. "Thanks, Kurt, it was a nice surprise." She looked at me and said, "You might be lucky today." It's been a while, and like I said, we haven't been getting along very well lately. Jenna finished getting ready in the bathroom and then cuddled up to me in bed. I had mixed feelings about having sex with her, especially if she cheated on me. I decided that until I had proof, I would let her make the first move. In the end, we ended up having sex, but it was pretty basic and nothing special. I gotta dig deeper into this. At least I had a good time for the rest of the week. I checked her phone location on Saturday night while she was out cold, but didn't find anything fishy. I snooped through her messages and calls and still nada. Starting to think George was full of it, trying to show off to some dude about his sex life. Not the first time I've caught him in a lie, been onto him since school. I went back to bed, but couldn't shake the feeling, kept tossing and turning, my mind wouldn't let it go. Yo, I couldn't sleep last night, it was like 2 in the morning and I was just laying there staring at the ceiling. So I got up and went downstairs to grab a drink, hoping it would help me sleep. I ended up sitting there with a glass of Jack Daniels and Coke in one hand and my wife's phone in the other. I decided to check her phone again, so I entered our daughter's date of birth as the password. When I opened the phone and saw her homepage, it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Our daughter's birth date was the key. The pregnancy was tough, we didn't think we would make it. Man, my wife almost lost the baby a few times during her pregnancy. Something about her age not matching my wife's. It was like my wife's body was rejecting the baby or something. In fact, for the last 3 weeks of the pregnancy, my wife had to be on bed rest just to make sure she could carry the baby to full term. And she did it, man. Exactly 9 months after our wedding, Carrie was born. We were over the moon, she was healthy. But let me tell you, she was a handful. Always crying, never sleeping enough, and never wanted to keep her hands to herself. So, Jenna's chest and all that stuff, my wife dropped a bomb on me in the car one day during our 2nd year of marriage. She straight up told me we were not having another kid. It bummed me out, but let's be real, that baby we had already was sucking all the happiness out of our lives. Funny thing is, she was born 9 months after our wedding. They call these kids wedding night babies because they're usually conceived on the night of the wedding or during the honeymoon. It hit me like a ton of bricks. If what George said was true, then there's a good chance Jenna was already knocked up before our wedding night. Damn. Man, we didn't even bother waiting until we tied the knot to start getting busy. Actually, that's pretty much all we did when we were together. The doc said that Jenna probably got knocked up because all the stress from the wedding messed with her hormones and made the birth control useless. So, if the pills didn't work that night, they probably didn't work any other time either. Now I'm left wondering if I'm even the dad. Like they say, the early bird catches the worm. George might have been an early bird, but I think he might have been too early in this situation. So, like, the saying should be the early bird gets the worm. I got off the couch and headed to the bathroom where I found some cotton swabs. Then I went to my kid's room and she was knocked out. She finally started sleeping better when she turned 4, before that she was struggling. She was passed out, mouth wide open, so I easily swabbed the inside of her cheek with a Q-tip. She didn't even wake up. I put the swab in a plastic bag and did it again. Yo, if Carrie ended up being my actual daughter, it would still make me wonder about Jenna's loyalty. And if Carrie wasn't really my flesh and blood, well, I'll deal with that later. Sunday was chore day, and we all had our own tasks. I made sure to take my sweet time with mine to avoid Jenna and Carrie. I was struggling to keep my feelings in check, so I didn't want to let anything slip. I was dying to know the truth about my suspicions, but at the same time, I was second-guessing myself all day. Jenna even asked me about it. Hey Kurt, is something on your mind? I had to think of something fast, so I said I want to buy a bunch of cars at the next auction to stock up my lot. This means money will be tight until I can make some sales to cover it. Well, don't stress us out. She always said we when talking about the business, which I guess was nice because she felt it was ours. But in reality, when I opened the car lot, I registered a company to protect myself from any liability. We live in a religious society, and I didn't want to. Man, if anything I've done in my business messes up my personal life, I'm gonna pay off the credit cards and only keep one open so our credit score looks good. I told her this was just a plan to make sure she doesn't screw me over financially if she finds out about my plans. She just coldly said, "Whatever needs to be done." This idea came to me out of nowhere. It's crazy how your mind can work if you let it. This would help limit any bad outcomes if. I found out that what I was thinking was totally right, dude. I woke up super early on Monday and brought my samples over to Western New Mexico University. I chatted with someone in the science department and they hooked me up with the department head. He said they have this sick program in cellular and molecular biology and they were down to help me out. I gave him some of my business cards and mentioned that anyone who worked on the samples would get a sweet 10% discount. He seemed pretty stoked about it. Oh, and by the way, I'm thinking about trading in my old Camry for a newer ride. I might swing by and check out what you've got. If you don't see anything you're into, just give me a shout and we'll figure something out together. I said thanks to him and he said he knows. I left the university with a smile, but it was more of a worried smile. The outcome could have been the end of my marriage. When I told Jenna about buying new cars to fill up the lot, it was just to cover up my anxiety. But now I'm thinking, hey, this isn't such a bad idea. So I called up Paul, my accountant and loan officer. I brought the part-time sales guy into my office and pitched him my idea. "We are gonna make it big," I said. But then he hit me with, "Hey Paul, there's something else I want to do. I want to pay off my mortgage. Can we do a lump sum payment so I can make it happen?" I told him I'd check out the financials and get back to him after lunch. As he walked out, I considered calling my lawyer for a referral to a family lawyer. But then I thought, maybe I'm jumping the gun. Let's wait and see how things play out first. After all, I haven't found any solid results yet. Man, I found out my wife was cheating on me during lunch. Paul showed me some evidence and we talked about what to do next. The next couple of days felt like forever as I waited for the DNA test results. Finally, on Wednesday night, the department head called me. He said he was bringing the results and wanted to check out my car. When he got here, I took him straight to my office. I could tell by the look on his face that the results were bad. And sure enough, he confirmed that the DNA samples matched. The results he gave me were not connected at all. I just nodded my head, but he could see that I was really upset by the news, even though I kind of saw it coming. He gave me a minute to process it and then handed me a manila envelope with the results. When I looked back up at him, my expression must have changed because he asked me what kind of car I was thinking of getting. I know it's cliché, but I just turned 50 and I'm thinking about getting a sports car. I mentioned the Mazda Miata. I told him I didn't have one, but I was planning to go to an auction the next day to try and find one. The car was in great shape, both inside and out. I'll give him a ring later today to tell him what I saw. When he left, I told Anna I'd leave early, but I'm just a phone call away if she needs me. I knew she wouldn't call though, she hardly ever needed my help, she could handle pretty much anything on her own. I cruised around the city, just taking in the sights. It all seemed so strange, like everything had changed. Afterwards, I phoned my lawyer. He was bummed about the news, but he hooked me up with another lawyer who he said could help me out. So, after I called, I booked an appointment for the next evening. I grabbed a bite to eat at a restaurant and as I was chowing down, I started thinking, have I really wasted the last 15 years of my life? I couldn't even say I had a kid from this marriage. Sure, I still saw her as my child to some extent, but biologically she wasn't. What do I do now? I knew I couldn't play dumb, I wasn't clueless before, but now that I know, there's no going back. The only thing I was certain of was that George would pay. I didn't care that he had been my buddy for years. With friends like him, I could do with more enemies. Jenna will also pay. I wonder if she knew that Carrie wasn't mine, but even if she didn't, she kept this secret from me, the secret of her cheating on her wedding day with my best man, who happens to be my best friend. Now I had no reason not to believe what I had overheard, that she was hooking up with him at least twice a month. I started to feel angry, and before I lost control, I needed to be alone, away from everyone. I should have called Jenna. I called her up and said I ain't coming home tonight. I might end up doing something that'll get me locked up. She picked up the phone and said, "Hey Kurt, I'm staying in Albuquerque tonight to be ready for the auction at 8. I replied coldly, "Oh, okay. Have a good trip." I don't usually go to Albuquerque for auctions, so this was weird. I wondered if she'd make the most of me being gone all night. She'd have to blame it on Carrie to my folks, and that would be hard to explain. I'm gonna keep an eye on her fake tracker tonight to see if she's gonna ditch us and head somewhere else. I drove down to Albuquerque to buy around 20 cars, including a Mazda Miata. I'll have them picked up and brought to my lot after the auction. Now I'm wondering who I can trust to inspect them mechanically. I know I won't be using George anymore after he's done with his routine checks and fixes once he finds out I bought 24 cars. His eyes will light up with dollar signs thinking about how much he can make off of this job. But that's not happening. I'll keep it hush-hush until the last minute. I needed to chat with a local auction dealer to find someone trustworthy to check them out before shipping them to our little town. I arrived in Albuquerque around 9 a.m. Checked into a Best Western hotel even though I own it. Couldn't afford a fancy hotel on the company's dime. The room and bed were comfy, just what I needed. I'm a simple guy with simple needs. Checked Jenna's phone tracker right away and saw she was still at home, or at least her phone was. Couldn't sleep that night, kept wondering why she did it. How could she have sex with him on our wedding day? I mean, seriously, I've been thinking about our marriage a lot lately. He was never Mr. Perfect, but I thought we were all about each other. Turns out, I was dead wrong from the start. Things were tough in the first few years after we tied the knot. We weren't even thinking about having a kid right away. We planned to wait like 3 or 4 years before starting a family. We even agreed on having 3 kids before we got married. But then that whole mess with Carrie messed everything up. I just found out that my best friend screwed up all my plans, and now all the hard work feels like it was for nothing. 14 years of effort down the drain. Yeah, we had some good times, but even those are overshadowed by this news. If Jenna hadn't slept with George, maybe she would have gotten pregnant with me instead, and maybe she wouldn't have had such a rough pregnancy and a difficult kid that made her not want any more. George really messed up my life when he hooked up with my future wife on my wedding day. Now he's seeing her at least twice a month, and I'm positive that all the time he's making fun of the dumbass pole he has to pay for. I lay there trying to sleep and I'm fuming. I needed to chill out or I wouldn't be able to sleep. I turned on the TV to some dumb comedy show. The laughter helped me calm down, and by 11 p.m. I was ready to pass out, looking forward to a long day ahead. The auction went well. I scored some awesome cars at great prices and met some dealers in the Albuquerque area. I didn't see any Miatas at the auction, so I started asking other dealers. 2 of them had one each. So there were 2 cars, one red and the other black. I asked the sellers if they were willing to make a deal once I knew which color my client wanted. They both said to just tell them what cars I had and they'll make it happen. I should have come to this auction more often. Talking to other businessmen in the same industry motivated me to grow my business and took my mind off my issues. But then in the afternoon, when I met with the lawyer, the news wasn't great. I'm gonna lose half of all my stuff. Man, I gotta fork over alimony and child support for a kid that ain't even mine. But you know what? I ain't gonna go through with the divorce. Instead, I'm gonna leave her with George's baby. I'll just pay off the mortgage on the house so she can stay there. But since my name is the only one on the mortgage, she can't sell it if I bounce. I'll still pay the taxes and utilities though, so she can't just dip and take the house. But now I gotta figure out what to do with my business since it's registered under my name. Man, I work for this company, and I just had this gut feeling that if I didn't take some action to protect it, I could kiss it goodbye. So, I knew I had to chat with my business lawyer about it. When I finally got home after a crazy long day, I was dead tired. I told Jenna, I'm beat. I'm gonna hit the shower and crash. Then I headed straight to the bedroom. She asked if I wanted dinner, but I said nah, I had a late lunch. At least she checked. That shower was like heaven, man. It was like all my problems just washed away. Yeah, I had some issues, but I was on my way to sorting them out. I was so tired from figuring out all those problems that I passed out as soon as my head hit the pillow. I had been super stressed out all week, but once I started making a plan, I could finally relax. I woke up early feeling all refreshed and went to the office before Jenna and Carrie were even awake. I had a bunch of stuff to do and tons of plans. When my team showed up, they found me buried in spreadsheets, financial reports, and sales forecasts. I told Paul that I bought 23 cars and that we were gonna seal the deal at the dealership in Albuquerque within a week. I told Anna to stop giving George any more work, but to keep it on the down low. She looked at me like she was confused. "You're the boss," she said. "Thanks, Anna, you're the best." At 9 I called my business lawyer and asked him what I should do. "Your business is registered, but she might still find a way to force you to sell it and split the money," he said. "Have you thought about selling it before?" "No, do I have to?" she asked. "It might be the only way to keep it out of her hands," he replied. "This business is my whole life, I can't just let it go," I told him. "All right, let me figure something out. Hey, take a moment to think and assess the situation. I'll give you a ring by the end of the week." The news I got was absolutely awful. I've really put in the hours to make my business what it is today, it's like my baby. Unlike Carrie, I told myself. I was so angry at that point. But hey, part of being a successful business person is being able to separate your emotions and juggle multiple tasks. I needed to push my personal issues aside and focus on the business. First thing on my agenda was to call Doug, the department head, who confirmed George's statement. "Doug, Kurt, Kaminsky, I need to talk to you. Hey, I found some info on 2 Miatas that you might like. One is red and the other is black. Are you still considering it?" "Yeah, if the price is good," he said. "What color are you thinking of?" "I can bring it over so you can check it out, and then we can talk numbers. Even if we can't agree on a price, I'm sure I can sell it without much hassle." "Which one do you recommend?" he asked. "Each has its own pros and cons. Fire red is a bold color, but it fades quickly. Black looks classy, but in our the weather heats up fast, so I gotta ask, you gonna keep this car in a garage when you're not using it?" "Yeah, I can do that. That way the red won't get too much sun and won't fade. I think red is the way to go, unless you prefer black." "Red sounds awesome. When can I come check it out?" "A Monday or Tuesday good for you?" "Definitely, give me a call when you get it." Cool, I hung up and called the dealer with the red car to set up a trade. He got interested in the BMW on my property. It's been sitting there for 3 years. Man, if he waited a few more months, he could have sold it in a big city by now. By the time George showed up, he had a bunch of cars that still needed fixing. Since he was working freelance, he had the freedom to come and go as he pleased, as long as he got the job done when I needed the car. He overheard some salesman chatting about 23 cars that were gonna show up in our warehouse soon. He popped into my office and asked, "Hey Kurt, when are those auction cars coming in? I want to make sure I have a schedule." "Hey, I'll get this done for you. The auction house will sort out the delivery, should be by the end of next week or early the following week." I told him it's hard for me to talk to him calmly, he's a damn trader. "All right, I'll get in touch with Anna and ask her to put me on the schedule." I just laughed to myself as he left that weekend. I tried to avoid Jenna, kept busy in the yard and running errands. Didn't even bother checking her phone tracker for me, it doesn't even matter anymore. I just feel pure contempt for her. Man, it was messed up that I was taking care of someone else's kid. But on Monday, I was back at the car show. I phoned the dealer in Albuquerque and said I'd come pick up the Miata in my Beamer. He was cool with it and suggested we grab a late lunch when I got there. It was a nice day for a drive, so I told Anna I'd be out all day. She said, "Got it, boss," and she really was indispensable. I decided to give her a raise. The trip and lunch were both enjoyable, and the other owner treated me well. I felt so welcomed, and it was like I made a new friend while driving the Miata back. It was so fun with the top down and the wind blowing through my hair. I decided right then and there that I was gonna call another dealer and get myself a black car. I needed to live a little, and I don't need more than a 2-seater for now. I pulled into our driveway in a red sports car, and Jenna must have said something to Carrie because they both came out to see. "Honey, why do you need this car? You know we need something with a back seat for Carrie." She was like, "I just picked her up from Albuquerque for a client, thought you might want to ride it." And I was like, "No, honey, I don't like small cars." Jenna then said, with a bit of attitude, "Carrie," I motioned for my daughter to sit down. "No, Dad, I feel bad enough that they tease me because of my last name. I don't want to be seen driving around with a Polish used car salesman," she said it like only a teenager could. I was shocked, to say the least. Where did this disrespect come from? When I looked at Jenna, I figured out that she was acting like Carrie did nothing wrong. Now both women in my house are being disrespectful to me. I know teenagers aren't supposed to be best friends with their parents, but the way she said it really hurt. It made me feel like my whole family life is a lie. Well, I'm gonna go for another drive. I'll be back as soon as I can, I said as I put the car in reverse and drove off. I cruised around the streets of Silver City and the surrounding areas, feeling angry. My marriage was falling apart quickly when I finally returned. I got home at 9:30 and went straight upstairs, took a quick shower, and jumped into bed. When I didn't come down after my shower, Jenna came into the room. The light from the hallway was shining right in my eyes, so I squinted and closed them. She asked me why I was upset because we didn't pick a sports car. "Aren't you gonna come down and hang out with the family? You're not just a husband, you're also a dad. Where's this attitude coming from?" I had to believe it was from George. Spent some time with him and his no-nonsense approach to my background influenced her, and now she's passing it on to her daughter. It wasn't my daughter, so I need to remember that. I might have to help her out, but she's not my responsibility. It seems like you and your daughter don't want me around, so I should just leave. I was pissed off, and her attitude wasn't making things any better. She'll regret treating me like this. After that, the Kaminsky house was silent and frosty. The next day, I gave Doug a ring and he swung by to take a look at the Miata. He was thrilled with it. We haggled over the price and he was shocked at what a good deal he was getting, $3,000 less than the Kelley Blue Book value. As he was getting ready to leave after sorting out all the paperwork, he mentioned that his best buddy handles car purchases for the university and they switch out about 16 cars every couple of years. I know it's not a huge deal, but could you chat with him? I'm always down to do business and I'll make sure they get a good deal. I told him I'd have Jim give him a call. "Hey, at the end of this week, thank you." I said that's how I grew my business, by treating people right and letting them know I valued their referrals. On Wednesday, my lawyer called me and said, "Hey Kurt, I think I have a solution to your potential problem. Could you come by this afternoon to discuss it with me?" Of course, I said, I can't wait to start. The atmosphere in my house is becoming simply unbearable. At the meeting that day, I heard the plan and I liked it. It will take about 2 weeks to implement, but if it works, it will be worth it. Over the past couple of weeks, I've been gradually shifting my stuff and tools from my house to an apartment in a nearby city. At the same time, George has been eagerly waiting for those 24 cars to show up so he can charge me for some work. When he asked about it, I just brushed it off. Last weekend, I did some yard work and took the opportunity to clean out my closet and drawers while Jenna and Carrie were out. Jenna took care of the laundry during the week so she could have free time on the weekends, which worked out well for me because she didn't notice that my stuff was slowly disappearing. Man, my closet was bare, which reminded me of that Monday night when I told Jenna I was out of there. She started being all rude and disrespectful, just like back when she was a stripper and a shady car saleswoman. I used to just crash at a motel for a night or two to cool off after fights like that. But this time, I was so mad I showed up early to work on Tuesday, called all my employees into the conference room, and shut the door behind them. We had our usual weekly meeting, but this time things were about to get real. "Hey everyone. Just wanted to give you a heads up that the cars I bought a few weeks back finally arrived yesterday afternoon. They've all been checked and prepped, so they are good to go for sale right now. Oh, and by the way, we won't be using George anymore for any work around here. If he asks, just say we decided to switch things up and leave it at that. You guys have all been awesome, like family to me. It's tough for me to think about what's next." I took a moment, wiped a tear from my eye, and then dropped the bomb: I sold the business. They all stared at me, shocked. They looked surprised, but don't worry, your job won't change much. Besides, Anna, you'll be taking on some of my tasks and, of course, you'll get a raise to go with it. Even in their surprised state, they all started congratulating Anna. They all respected her and knew she deserved it. Anna, after the meeting, come talk to me. We'll go over some stuff. I'll still be around in the company, but more in an advisory role and might help with sales here and there. I don't want to steal your thunder. They were all impressed. Man, I'm happy I can still hang around sometimes. The meeting wrapped up, and as we were leaving, George was waiting by the door. He asked, why wasn't I invited to the meeting? He had been to most of the previous ones. I told him it was a staff meeting and you're not on the payroll. He kind of stumbled over his words and then said, oh, I see the cars are here now. I'll start working on them. I replied, nah, they've already been checked and prepped for sale. You don't need to do anything. So then I was like, listen, Kurt, I'm gonna have to go through all your cars. And George was like, what's going on? And I was like, I sold the business and the new owner wants to do things differently. I didn't want to blow up on him right then and there, saving that for another day. I left everything as is because sometimes less is more. I can't believe you sold the business, he said. What am I supposed to do now? Typical, it was all about him. Basically, he was told he's out of a job. Oh well, I said. Hey, you can grab your paycheck for the work you did in the last 2 weeks. It wasn't a lot because Anna only used your services a few times. You were chilling before delivering 23 cars, thinking you'd be swamped when they arrived. Boy, were you wrong. I didn't feel bad for you at all. I just wish I could tell you it's because you were a jerk. When I met Anna, I asked her to keep our chat on the down low. Of course, Kurt, I won't spill anything you don't want me to, she promised. All right, here's the. So, I started these companies and got them registered in Nevada. One of them bought a parking lot, and the other bought the first company. I own all the shares in both companies. Eventually, I'm gonna divorce Jenna and make sure she doesn't get any of the business. She's wondering why I moved out of the house, but she doesn't know yet that I'm not going back. Turns out, she had an affair with George. And you know what? I don't think Carrie is even my daughter. I suspect she's George's. I don't even know if Jenna knows about this whole mess, let alone George. They'll figure out soon enough that I ain't divorcing her, but I'll keep paying for the house bills and taxes so she can't claim I abandoned her and take all my stuff if she decides to file for divorce over some BS reasons. I ain't letting her get her hands on my business, that's why I agreed to sell the company twice. Let them try to figure out what's happening. By the time she finalizes the divorce, the money from the sale will be long gone. I barely make any money from consulting and I only get a few commissions from sales. Anna, you can handle the day-to-day stuff. I'll be around if you need me, but I trust you and your decisions. She smiled when I told her about the new owner, but when she heard about Jenna and George, she looked like she was ready to kill someone. I really looked up to and respected this woman. I have one more thing for you to do before I leave. I need you to order a new sign. So, we are switching up the business name on the letterhead. This will make George and Jenna really believe that the business has been taken over by someone else. The new name will be Helpless Car. I made sure to spell it out for her so she got it right. She stared at me in confusion. I promise to explain the name choice someday, but for now, just know that it tells the whole story. She still looked confused, but trusted me enough to go along with it. With that, I said a quick goodbye to everyone and left. So I hopped in my Audi and headed towards Albuquerque. About 2 hours into the drive, I got a call from Jenna. I wasn't expecting to hear from her so soon, but this has happened before. Whenever I leave for a day or two, she always ends up calling. We chat, things change for a bit, and then we go back to normal. But then we'd argue again and the whole cycle would repeat. I decided to answer the call, curious to hear what drama she had this time. She was freaking out this time. Hello, I said over the car speakerphone. What's up, CT, she replied, sounding unsure. Nothing, just heading to Albuquerque, I said flatly. Why are you going there? To pick up the car. So, what I heard must be false. George must have given her a heads up. Call your side piece and see what's up with her husband, she suggested. I don't know, I said. What did you hear? George called me and said you sold the business. Why would he call you? I asked, confused. she clarified. Can you believe it? My so-called best friend thought I had no clue what was really going on. He actually found it funny that he was betraying me behind my back with my own wife. And get this, my family was ashamed that I was just a used car salesman. So yeah, I sold the business to get rid of that label. But shouldn't we have discussed it first? She was probably worried about our future. Well, now I run the show. This is my company, I had it way before we even met. Got hitched and now I can sell it whenever I feel like it. Just hoping the new owner treats my old workers right. Did you get a decent price for it? She was stressing about how it would impact her lifestyle, but I didn't give a damn. I just knew I needed a new gig. I'll start job hunting after I take a couple weeks off to chill. What about a mortgage? She asked. Oh, I used the cash to pay off the house. You don't gotta stress about that now, just gotta cover utilities and taxes. And what about food? And gas? She was freaking out about the insurance. Oh man, I feel like an idiot for not even considering that. Do you think you could work more hours at your job now? She was pumped. When are you coming back home? This is make it or break it. I'm not coming back, I said nonchalantly. Remember that night I told you I was leaving? You said not to come back, so I won't. Don't worry, I'll figure out a way to pay all the bills so the power stays on. You can't do this, Kurt, you have to come back. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but I was like, no, I really don't want to, I said, all cool and detached. CT, don't do this, she cried. I already did it. What about your daughter? She asked, trying to pull at my heartstrings. You mean Carrie, the girl who's ashamed of her last name and the fact that her old man was or is a used car salesman, Kurt. She's just a 13-year-old girl, you can't take this to heart. Well, it doesn't matter anymore. I won't be back again, so none of you will be embarrassed of me. With those words, I hung up and turned off the phone. Let her. Yo, so I was thinking about it and I knew she was gonna be pissed that I didn't pick up her call. After I chilled out from that convo, I just tried to enjoy my drive to Albuquerque. I was pretty sure she was gonna call her man for more info and to spill the beans on what I said. When I finally got to where I was going, I turned my phone back on and saw I had 5 messages, 3 from Jenna, 1 from George, and 1 from Anna. I called Anna right away and was like, hey, sorry about not picking up earlier. Hey, my phone was off and I got some annoying calls. Yeah, I know your wife and George called me trying to track you down. I told them you don't live here anymore, so they shouldn't bother coming around. Hope everything's alright. I told them to back off and call the cops if they keep harassing you. Anna said she's got your back. She said, Kurt, you might feel like you're alone, but we're your family and always will be. Thanks, Anna. You know just what to say. I hope your husband realizes how lucky he is. Trust me, he knows. He's always talking about it. Never take each other for granted. I won't. After she hung up, I debated whether to call my cheating wife or not. Nah, let them deal with it. I got out of the Audi and went into the parking lot office. The owner was waiting for me there. I have that Audi I mentioned to you. Would you be interested in discussing a possible trade-in? Let's see, he said, impressed with the condition of the car. Man, that car was clean inside and out, and when I popped the hood, he gave me a look like I can sell this in a week. Are you sure you want to trade? I feel like I'm getting the better end of the deal. You can return the favor down the line. I'm not in it for the money, I just want a sports car. Half an hour later, I was back on the road with the top down, just enjoying the ride. Now, I had to figure out where to go next. Heading north to Santa Fe sounded good, so that's where I went. Over the next 2 weeks, I cruised through northern New Mexico, Arizona, southern Utah, and Colorado. I just wanted to be close by. I called Anna a bunch of times just in case she needed me to come back. When it seemed like she had everything under control, I made the decision to head west. Of course, they kept calling me. At first, they were annoyed, then apologetic, and finally, there were hints of bitchiness in their messages. I listened, but I didn't give a damn. When they called to tell me that my credit card had been cancelled, I just laughed. And when George called to say I was a terrible person for leaving Jenna and Carrie, I had to laugh even more. My lawyer actually sent me a message about Jenna. So, this lady called me up and threatened to lock me down at home if I didn't get in touch with her and return. I called her back and was like, "Hey, this is Kurt." She mentioned how my wife had called her and made some threats. I confirmed that, but also reassured her that as long as you're still paying for the house, she's gonna have a hard time proving anything. I then suggested that I have a recording where I'm telling my wife I'm leaving and she's telling me not to come back. It's pretty epic. The lady was like, "Send me a copy of that." I replied, "Sure, and if she gives me any trouble, I'll take it to her lawyer. Let her lawyer deal with it. I'll hit you up in a week to see what's good." I traveled all around the Southwest in my Miata, not the most comfy ride, but it was a blast. Got some looks, even had some middle-aged women flashing me, but I wasn't about that. Still married, why no. Drove to Reno, Lake Tahoe, the coast, Napa Valley, and Highway 1, cruising along the shoreline. Hit up Yosemite and San Diego on the way through Death Valley. From Valley to Vegas, then down to Phoenix. I was taking my time. I stopped in parking lots, chatted with the owners, and some of them were envious that a guy in his 30s could just up and travel. After about 3 months and 8,000 miles, I decided to head back to Silver City. When I got to the auto shop, my whole team greeted me, and there were even some new faces. They all welcomed me back with open arms. As I walked into Anna's office, which used to be mine, she looked up, her smile getting even bigger as she stood up. So I walked up to her desk and she gave me a big hug. We chatted for a bit, and then I asked, "Think I can invite everyone to Wrangler's for some food and drinks? Can you close up shop at 5? It was already 3, and I had a few things to take care of. "I'll make sure everyone comes," I insisted. I said my goodbyes and told them I'd see them in 2 hours. They seemed happy about it. Then I went to see my lawyer, who told me that while I was away, Jenna tried to claim all my stuff through some legal loophole. He totally stopped her from doing it. We figured out our next move at 5Y, then I met up with the team at Wrangler Restaurant. We had an awesome dinner and had a good chat with everyone. After about an hour and a half, they started heading home, leaving just Anna and me. As I was leaving, she looked at me and said, "Kurt, you might feel like you're clueless and don't know what's going on, but you're mistaken. You simply put your trust in those you care about." I looked at her and replied, "So you figured me out?" "Yep, it took me a while," she said, "but I finally got it." Hey, so, this whole name thing really got to me until I figured it out. Yeah, you might be Polish, but all these jokes just don't do justice to who you really are. It's like disrespecting you and where you come from. Thanks, Anna, you're the reason I came back. I had to see how you handled my stuff. And I gotta say, you haven't filled my shoes, but you've made your own pair. I had a great mentor. We hugged it out, and she went home to her hubby, who was one happy dude. Then I went back to the apartment I hadn't been in for 3 days. For months, this place has been smelling funky and needed some fresh air. I opened the windows and let the cool evening breeze flow in. I grabbed a beer and sat on the patio, looking out at the pool where some folks were swimming and a family was having fun. I couldn't help but think about Jenna and me. We used to have big dreams when we first got married, but now it all seems to have vanished. Glancing at the clock, I saw it was around 8:30 and a sudden thought hit me. It's time for a change. I got up, hopped into my Miata, and drove off. I drove to my house, which I guess technically was still mine. I bought it before Jenna and I got married, and my name was the only one on the deed. I was disappointed when I pulled into the driveway. The yard was not well kept. It seemed like the landscaping hadn't even been touched. The light was on and I assumed Jenna was home. I went to the door and knocked. A minute later the door opened and Carrie stood there. Her eyes got big and she asked, "Dad." "Hi Carrie, is your mom home?" she asked. She stuttered and then shouted, "Mother." I heard Jenna shout from inside. So I was in the kitchen, right? And then Jenna just starts yelling at me, like, "What's wrong?" And I'm just standing there, minding my own business. Then suddenly, Dad shows up and Jenna flips out, asking me where I think I'm going. I respond all cool and collected, saying I'm just heading out. That's when George walks out of the bedroom in his undies. And I'm like, oh great. The whole fam's here now, Mom, Dad, the kid. And Jenna's like, what are you even talking about? She was so mad. I guess George was taking over for me or something. It's his place, after all. And Jenna just gave me this confused look. Carrie said he got kicked out of his apartment after you let him go, and Mom needed a man to help out with bills and stuff around here since you left. She was so angry you could practically feel it in her voice. Well, young lady, it seems like you've got the wrong idea, I told her. She always hated being corrected. George was never my employee, he insisted on that. So I couldn't have fired him. And as for bills, all the utilities and car insurance are paid for. What about food and gas for the car? Jenna yelled. You had a job, didn't you? Did you lose it? I remember you used to be so angry before. I had enough money for groceries and gas while I was away, so you think you can just come back and move back in? She asked. No, I'll wait until you and your lover find somewhere to live. It was obvious they were sleeping together in my house and Carrie seemed fine with it. I'm not leaving my house, Jenna said. Correction, this is my house. It was mine before we got married and only my name is on the contract, I replied. Well, you left, so now he's mine. The law doesn't work like that. Hey, you guys gotta handle the bills and taxes. I may not be around much, but I still own the place. Don't stress, lovebirds, you've got until the end of next month to find a new spot. Just make sure you bring your daughter with you. Wait, why do you say your daughter? She's our daughter, let's keep it real. Jenna looked confused, so I told Carrie, hey, I know you hate being called Polish, so here's some good news, your real dad is George, not me. The room fell silent. The room was so loud that after a minute Jenna timidly asked, what? Yeah, Jenna, it looks like your little slip-up on your wedding day resulted in a kid showing up, but not mine. Good news for you, Carrie, you can now take your real dad's last name and be Carrie H. I wonder if Mom didn't push for the name Carrie out of respect for her lover. I glanced at Jenna and she glanced at George. He was pale as a ghost. What, George? Don't you want to be a dad? Well, that's too bad. You gotta own up to it. But look at it this way. It's only 4 more years until college, Jenna and George said almost at the same time. I don't believe that, I replied, tossing them the DNA report. They grabbed it, glanced at it, and then both passed out. Carrie, let the lovebirds know that your mom will be getting served with divorce papers and an eviction notice next week, I said as I turned and walked away. The whole time I was gone, I couldn't help but wonder if this affair had been going on throughout our marriage. In fact, I questioned whether she had ever been faithful to me since we first met when she came to buy a car, George. So, I was fixing up this car with this girl and we both thought it could be a fun date. But then, I was left wondering if she actually picked me or not. I felt so lost and clueless. Throughout all of this, George was laughing at me behind my back and making Polish jokes to my face. I went back to my place, cracked open a beer in the morning, then headed to the lawyer to start sorting out all the paperwork. I knew I'd have to sell the house and split the cash, but since I barely had a job, I figured I wouldn't have to shell out any alimony or child support, especially since there was. Man, there's already someone else filling my shoes, or at least that's what I was hoping for. I love Jenna and George to bits, but the betrayal was just too much. It's gonna take me a hot minute to trust anyone again, whether they're a guy or a gal. Maybe I should consider seeing a therapist. As the divorce stuff kept moving along, I went back to working at the car dealership, but this time as a salesman. I made it crystal clear to all my coworkers that I wasn't the big boss anymore, and all I needed was 1 sale a week to cover my bills and groceries. Actually, I was dead set on just 1 sale. When it came to court-ordered child support, I had my own ideas on how much I wanted to pay. So, at the end of the month, I was broke except for my basic living expenses. Jenna went and got herself a lawyer. I have no idea how she paid for it, maybe he did it for free. He's gonna be shocked when they checked my bank accounts and saw that I spent all the money from the sale. They even checked out the sale itself but didn't find anything fishy. They didn't really investigate thoroughly enough. I heard from my coworkers that George was showing up to talk to Anna almost every day while I was out. Whenever he asked her to work, she always said no without any hesitation. Eventually, he stopped asking. Now he wishes he had gotten his ASC certification because the only job he could find was at Valine Quick Oil Change, paying $1.3 an hour. I was hoping Jenna would go full-time, otherwise they would struggle to make ends meet. I called the realtor and told Jenna I was selling the house, expecting to split our assets 50-50ths. She had already been served an eviction notice, so she had to move out before. Okay, so my house got sold and I was just chilling one evening when Jenna showed up at my door. I opened it and gave her a look like, "What do you want, Jenna?" She asked if we could talk, but I was like, I don't think that's a good idea considering we're in a lawsuit against each other. But she kept insisting, saying it's just the two of us and we can have a civil conversation. I reluctantly agreed, but suggested we go to Denny's instead. I didn't trust her enough to be alone with her, so I thought there should be some witnesses around. We ended up sitting in a booth at Denny's and after that. So, after a bit of small talk, I finally asked Jenna why she chose me. She hesitated for a moment, then replied, "I think the simple answer is that I liked both of you and couldn't decide, so I was dating both of you at the same time." She glanced down at the table and admitted, "Yes, but George warned me not to say anything because he knew it would mess up our personal and work relationship with him." I then asked her why she said yes when I proposed to her. She simply said, "Because I loved you." I couldn't help but wonder about George, so I asked her if she loved him too. She confessed, "I loved him too, but I knew he would never." So, like, when you proposed to me, he and I talked about it and decided to break up. I wanted to focus on us and getting ready for our wedding. But on our wedding day, while we were doing it, you said, "I'm marrying him but you're still mine." She started crying, everything was a mess. What was that all about, Jenna? She hesitated and then said she didn't want to lose him and he didn't want to lose me. Well, now you guys have each other and your kid. By the way, she did a great job picking the name. I didn't realize until I had some time to think during those 3 months on the road that Carrie wasn't yours. I swear, I had no clue. Then she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Kurt, I gotta talk to you. I still love you." It was nice to hear from her, but I had to keep it real. "Jenna, you don't even know what love is. I loved you more than anything in this world, but clearly you can't say the same. I used to love you, but now I can honestly say that I don't feel that way anymore. I loved you with all my heart, but now all I feel is contempt for you." When I told her that, she looked at me and knew it was the end for us. There's no going back, it's over. I had to ask her one more thing, "Have you ever stopped loving me?" She paused for a moment, then shrugged and confessed that we never really stopped. We had our ups and downs, but we still hooked up, mostly twice a month. I was hoping for a different answer, but at least she was honest. "One more thing, what happened about a year ago that made you start treating me so badly? Your whole attitude towards me shifted." She was clearly showing she didn't like it, her face turned red and she got a bit mad. "George was trying to convince me to have a threesome, but not with you. I might have gone for it if you were on board, but we couldn't figure out how to make it work. He kept pushing for it and it made me mad at you for something I know you wouldn't do. I know it sounds weird, but I thought I could have both my men loving me at the same time, and I was mad at you for not being cool with it. So you did it. I didn't ask, I just thought about it, but then you left and my whole world fell apart, but now you can do whatever you want because I don't care anymore." We both knew we were done talking, so I paid the bill and we went to our cars. 4 months later, we were in front of a judge getting divorced. George was there too. As we were leaving, Jenna suggested grabbing a drink the old-fashioned way. Of course, I agreed. By then, any bad feelings I had towards them had disappeared. I thought to myself, this will be the last time I have to be around them. Now they can do their thing. Let those pigs live in their own mess, they deserve each other. Ha! Jenna better get used to a lower quality of life. Okay, maybe the bad blood hasn't disappeared. I may be Polish, but I'm a respected individual. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so your partner doesn't cheat on you again. And go ahead and tune into the next story, because this one is nothing compared to what's coming next. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.